In this video, we want to talk about the new Linux Mint version, which is coming in this summer. Also about great news with Debian and Android, and in the end Linux and Android. Very, very cool. Very much potential we are seeing there. Also, let's have a look at some more Mozilla drama, and also in the end let's have a look about Fedora 42, which will be released as a beta in the next week. Let's start right through with Linux Mint. And to make it very short, Linux Mint gets a new start menu, which we are seeing just right here. And they had changed a lot. If we compared to the old menu, we see it like here. We see our categories are moved a bit to the right. And also we got a bit more information because we are only seeing the app name currently on Linux Mint, and on the new Linux Mint version, which will be released in the summer, I guess June or July, we have some descriptions which have a bit more information about these apps and are explaining a bit more. I would say this is a great improvement in these terms. Also, we see a changed sidebar. We don't have a places category here because it is moved to the left here and is permanently seen. I would say this is a great feature for all users which are switching from Windows, because I guess these documents or downloads folders are way more important for Windows users to find, or to easily find them, because they don't know anything like a personal home folder, even if Windows already has them all the time, but they don't focus too much on this personal folder. So Linux Mint just tries to move to be more usable for especially Windows switchers, I would say. Also, we see our favorites moved down a bit, and they are not too important anymore than in this menu. To be honest, I don't use them a lot here, so maybe it's a good thing that they moved it a bit down and made it a bit smaller. But what I'm criticizing about this menu is we have too much text in my eyes. So I would prefer that we disable this text here, and only if you hover over these folders, then you can see, for example, what folder we want to open here up. I know that this would become a bit more challenging if we add some own folders in here, but maybe you could then separate them by, for example, giving different colors and such things. I think that would be a great feature, but at the current time, I hope maybe they will change it. But we also see some user information here. I guess you will get in the profile information by clicking on this. But yeah, I'm very curious how this turns out in the new Linux Mint version 22.2, in which this menu will be released. Also, we got a bit data about Linux Mint, and we see how many users use which edition. The main edition of Linux Mint is Cinnamon, of course, and Cinnamon has about 44%. With LMDE and Edge together, it has about 60%, which is quite much, and XFCE and Mate have around 20% each. I'm quite surprised that Cinnamon is only at 60%, but gives the other editions we see on Linux Mint a bit more relevance, and also in the future it secures, I would say, the spot staying inside the Linux Mint family and don't get ditched out like, for example, KDE. But KDE was a special case in 2018, I guess. They released their very last KDE version because their KDE uses a complete different tool set, and it's just another technology. So yeah, XFCE, Mate and Cinnamon are kind of related each other, especially if we have a look to GTK, the window framework, which Linux Mint is using in almost every app. Now let's get to I would say, breaking news kind of, and in my opinion it's the news with the most potential we see here, and this is Android will run Debian Linux. And really run Debian Linux. We already have some Linux kind of apps on the App Store, which we could just start and try using it. But Android will be capable of running a full Linux distribution via virtualization. This is really, really great, and this has a lot more potential than we could think about, because Android is the most used end user operating system. So for example, the FlatHub could run inside Android, and we could use all Linux apps inside our Android smartphone. This is crazy. To be honest, we only have the ARM architecture because all Android phones are relying on this architecture. Our default architecture, we are almost all running on our desktop computers, which is AMD 64, is a lot more expensive in power usage. And because of this, all mobile devices should use ARM. Even Apple did switch about, I guess, 5 years to it. Now, I would say the ARM technology becomes also much more relevant in the Linux world, and even more relevant now with this new virtual machine capability of Linux. And why is Google doing this? They are doing this because of Chrome OS. Chrome OS at the time is based on Linux, but they want to switch from Linux to an Android to be more consistent in their whole app environment, and that you could use just Android apps natively on Chrome OS, of course, but they still want to keep the compatibility to Linux, which is very important for some more kind of complicated apps or some more production apps for companies, for example. And with this, they are bringing a Linux to Android completely. And with Android 16, it should be also possible to run Linux GUI apps on Android. This will be great, I guess. And you can now just enable on all Pixel smartphones which have the Android version 15 in their March Pixel feature drop, it is called. You can just install Linux terminal as a native application, a native Linux terminal with everything you have inside. This is kind of crazy. At the time it's very basic, but I guess it has a lot potential in the future, because then Linux is just dominating the whole market. If we have a look to Windows, they also adapted Windows subsystem for Linux, and also Windows 11 is now supporting Android apps, by the way. So they also got the hint that they want to push Android in a way, or also to push their own operating system. So you could also use on Windows 11 every Android app. And maybe also a similar feature will be around in the next few years, if maybe then the Android universe will then grow bigger and bigger, and maybe will be kind of a good replacement for web apps, but I don't know. We are not talking about Apple at this point, and Apple has around, I guess, 15 or 20% usage overall, and this is of course also a very high percentage which we are blocking out, or which Apple itself is blocking out from. Let's see what the future brings. But to get back to this very important news, I would say it's a lot more potential that the traditional Linux distributions are getting more dominant in the user market. Of course, the Linux kernel itself is the biggest kernel and the most spread kernel we ever had worldwide, of course, but not as our traditional Linux distributions when it comes to end user usage. But of course, also in the server space, Linux has a great potential and already has a very, very big market share. And this could now grow with Android users, the most used end user operating system we have out there. So also let us come to Mozilla Firefox. They have a kind of a bad month, I would say. At the last video we spoke about Mozilla Firefox changing their end user license agreement and also putting some very ambitious phrases in there. They fixed it up now. They also did an interview on the Linux Experiment channel. They are kind of rowing back, but also want to establish kind of a community testing area where they want to release breaking changes, like for example a very changed user license agreement before, or want to announce it before they implement it straight into their products, which would be really, really great. But still, I would say Mozilla has to get our trust back, and let's see how this is working out in the long run. Also, they have some more trouble with the US justice system, because the US justice want to prevent that search engines are financing browsers. And this is Mozilla's biggest income source. And if this will be prohibited in the future by the US state, this gets existential for Mozilla. And this would be very, very bad, because Mozilla is funding itself through Google, because if we have a look to Firefox and if we want to search something, the default search engine is Google. Surprise. And yeah, of course, Google pays a lot for that. Google is the biggest search engine for Firefox. And Mozilla says that the new proposal hurts more than it helps, especially in browser competition. So it will be quite interesting how this may change the future. But also, if we have a look to the US government since the 20th of January this year, one thing we learned: the US government changes their mind sometimes much more often than the weather changes. So yeah, let's have a look how this will turn out in the end, but it will be quite existential for the whole Mozilla Foundation. So let's hope that they will get this fixed in any way. So in the end, let's have a talk about Fedora 42. Fedora 42 will be released as a beta version in the following week, and we are getting Wayland support for the installer, because it still runs on X11 at the current time. But also the installer gets constant criticism since the installer exists, because if we have a look to the Fedora installer, it looks quite bulky and the user experience isn't the best in any way. And maybe they also change something in the UX here, but let's have a look. But also, let's talk about desktop environments. KDE is now becoming an official edition of Fedora. If we want to download Fedora Workstation now, we only see the GNOME version for this, but in the future there will also be the KDE version displayed right next to the GNOME version, so it becomes a very official version. So with this, KDE gets as important as the GNOME version under Fedora, which is great news for all KDE users, and especially for all KDE users with Fedora. Great to hear that, and I'm very curious how this will turn out in the future. Fedora 42 will be released with GNOME 48 and Plasma 6.3, which are the very latest desktop versions. I'm very looking forward for these, especially the GNOME 48 version, which also has great new functionality, like, for example, the digital well-being app. Very cool, and the very first one in a desktop environment inside Linux. Can't wait to test it out inside an official Fedora version. So this was it for today. I hope you found this video informative and helpful. If so, please leave a like and subscribe to this YouTube channel, because every week we are releasing new stuff around Linux and open source. With that, stay tuned. Have a nice day, have a nice week, and see you on the next one. Bye.